Justin Tomlinson.
And Deputy Speaker, and it's a pleasure to speak in this debate. We all have a calling as MPs and why we get involved, and mine was driven around social mobility. I went to school, bottom of the league tables. I lost my father at an early age, and I have always recognised that if we get this area right, the things we've all been discussing, and many of it, despite the partisan speech of the Shadow Minister, we are united on, can unlock potential and allow people to progress in life. And I have served now 23 years representing my community, initially with a Labour Council, a Labour government, and now with a Conservative Council and a Conservative government. So I've seen both sides. Neither got it all right, neither got it all wrong. But the reality was schools were built late under the Labour regime. When we did get them, they were PFI. They came with huge extra costs and were limited in their ability to meet changing demands, particularly when numbers increased. Under our government, we have delivered a swathe of new schools, including the £23 million new Great Western Academy, bizarrely opposed by one of the former Labour Shadow Secretaries of State for Education, which is now full, and we are seeking to expand. This is making a difference to parents. 91% of parents in my constituency, in the top 10 in the country, now are able to secure their first choice school. What a contrast to when I used to have to go to public meetings to see the anguish and the anger of families who were being robbed of the opportunity to have the school that they deserve to send to their children. But as a big supporter of the Free Schools programme, I do have some, I hope, constructive asks. Firstly, around the welcome consolidation of maths. I think that helps in terms of the pooling of resources, training, recruitment, career progression for teachers. But I also think it should go further. And when we consider large new school sites, look to consolidate the offerings. So that you don't just have the traditional secondary schools, but potentially the UTC provision, grammar streams, SEM provision, and so that children can move throughout their school life. Because what we do see is some develop at different stages, and they can then stay on the same site but move around. And I've seen some examples of this on a smaller scale, but I think that's got future potential. And also, and the ministers will not be surprised by this, around making sure that when we award free schools, we get the consultation right. Yeah. There is an issue at the moment that the provisional schools awarded then carry out the consultation. And we have had a case in my constituency where a school was the only bidder at the time, a long time ago, before they came forward. They then decided to go against what both the community, the elected representatives and the local authority wanted, but they carried out their own consultation and frankly picked and cherry-picked which bits they wanted out of it. And the regional schools coordinator frankly was useless in doing anything about that. And our local community feels slighted by that, and we just hope that that will be reflected and improved on in the future. Now, I recognise that the two ministers representing us today are fully over their breach, thoughtful, and crucially are willing to engage, and both are parents. I thought it was a bit of a bizarre comment earlier to say there aren't enough parents speaking. I think probably most of us are parents. I know we're having a 4-week-old child that sleep is for the week, and I can confirm I definitely am a parent on the back of that. Now, turning to nurseries, I'd like to pay tribute to the Minister for Children and Families, who in his then new role came up to visit Councillor Joe Morris, who also is a director of a number of nurseries in my constituency, and he took the time to thoroughly engage around the challenges. So again, to be helpful, I have some asks, but first of all, I wish, along with many other speakers, to pay tribute to the fantastic nurseries and staff who throughout COVID were able to keep the show on the road, and sometimes felt that they were the last one standing. And you know, parents, we were very, very grateful for what they were able to do. But the first one is the peculiar position that schools that offer nursery provision do not pay business rates, yet traditional nurseries do pay business rates, though I think most of us would recognise they are actually an educational establishment. In the case of the nursery that the Minister visited, they pay £15,000 a year. They have around about 100 children, so that equates to about £150. So in his supremely effective lobbying of the Chancellor, please add that one to the list. Around the broader point of funding, we all support the annual increases in the national living wage above inflation, but we also must recognise that nurseries who predominantly rely on the free provision funded by the government have limited abilities to then increase income, and that has to be taken into the account. And I know that there is discussion around and consultation looking around ratios, but actually there is other options around the qualified ratios, but underpinned with strict conditions linked to Ofsted inspections. But this is a particular challenge around recruitment, and at short notice where recruitment is a challenge, nurseries then would rely on agencies with very expensive costs, which then again impacts on the viability of them. And I welcome the government's investment around speech and language development and the catch-up post-COVID, but could consideration be put into allowing nurseries on a case-by-case basis to also bid for some of that money? Because without having the expertise of those fellow honourable members and friends who are teachers in a former life, I suspect actually doing some of that in nursery would make a significant difference. And again, it was highlighted to us post-COVID, there was a direct impact on that generation of young children entering nurseries on their speech. And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, you will find no bigger fan of the school holidays, after school provisions and the holiday activity fund. It's something that I have pushed for in years and years in debates, and bringing Mark Draycott of Draycott Sports Cam to Parliament to meet with the now Secretary of State for Education, who was in a former role in the Department of Education. And this is a huge welcome relief for busy working parents. Nothing fills busy parents with dread greater than the thought of a long summer holiday and entertaining their children. So I want to see the government turbocharge this. I think we can do more around sharing best practice, because it is still in its infancy. That will help build capacity to provide greater local choice, and also to consider one of my long-standing asks around the free use of school, community and sports facilities for any community parents group that are putting on constructive activities for young children. That will predominantly be sport, but it can also just be scouts, guides or other activities. It does seem a bit bizarre that we ask volunteers to step forward and then charge them for the privilege. And finally, as we look at cost of living, one thing that would make a big difference is if we actually followed the German model of spreading out term times region by region, so that we dampen down the demand, the peak demand for school holidays, and that would then save hard-working parents considerable amounts of money. Thank you.
Munira Wilson.